Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me here. It's great to be back in Tel Aviv after 2 years with the COVID pandemic, and thank you very much for the warm welcome. For those who don't know Frontier Economics yet, maybe I give you a brief summary so you know who's speaking to you. So we are an independent economic consultancy. We are about 300 people, 300 consultants with offices in Cologne, in Berlin, in Paris, in Brussels, in London, and in Dublin. And we are working across the whole energy and transport sector. We work for the European Commission, we work for ministries, for regulators, for power companies, gas companies, wind companies, storage operators, transmission systems. So you know you get it, car manufacturers. And from all this work, I guess we get a really good 360-degree view on the energy sector. And the next 20 minutes, I would give you and share with you some insights, and hopefully you have also some interesting lessons learned for the way forward in Israel. So what's the plan? So this, what you see here, is now what we call the new Green Deal in Europe. It has been proposed by the European Commission last year. It has strengthened the old new Green Deal, and now they have published a package which they call Fit for 55, and the 55 is the big red number in the middle, where they say we want to reduce our carbon emissions by 2030 by minus 55% in the next 10 years almost, or 8 years from now on. And this is about 3 times the speed of carbon abatement which we have achieved between 1990 and today. So this is really, really ambitious and speeding up. And also, the long-term plan is really ambitious. It was, the old Green Deal said at least minus 80%, now we say minus 95. So that, put simply, that means we have some cattle emissions from cows and some unavoidable process emissions. The rest is green in 2050. So this is a really, really long-term target, and they acknowledged that the old target was not in line with the Paris Agreement. And there was a lot of pressure on the streets from Fridays for Future and other debates. And now, since December, I think you know that, and we already heard about that, and latest from February this year with the Russian invasion, the energy economic triangle comes back into more balance. Like 2021 with Fridays for Future, with a lot of discussion about the climate and the Glasgow summit coming. It was all about climate discussion. Now it's about costs and energy of supply. We have even a rich country like Germany, we have energy poverty in some for poorer people. There are payments from the government to the people. We had fertilizer plants cutting down production for a month in December. Paper mills went down for a month, steel production went down, and we heard about the inflation, which is currently at 7% in Germany, and a lot of that is due to energy prices. And this has now really, really come on the topic, plus the fact that we want to be independent in Europe from Russian gas. We heard it today. I think we are less dependent in oil. We get rid of coal dependence by end of the year, but gas is a problem. And we have now discussed about new LNG terminals. I give you more details later on that. But I think this is one of the interesting lessons learned, and I'm glad to hear that your ministry already learned this lesson, that you need a balanced approach when you think about the energy policy in the country. And we had to learn it the hard way. And as an answer to Russian invasion, the European Commission has issued a paper which they called the Repower EU vision. The Repower EU vision goes beyond the Fit for 55, beyond the Green Deal. And the old or the new Green Deal, they wanted to reduce thermal, like fossil production, fossil use, and also gas use by minus 1,000 terawatt hours. And now, as a reaction to Russia, we want to become independent from Russia. And this has many sources, and I would just want to highlight the key pillars. One is LNG. Germany will have 4 new LNG terminals, having no terminal at all. When I joined energy economics 15 years ago, there was already discussion, nothing happens, and now we plan 4 LNG terminals by the mid of 2024. This should bring 500 terawatt hours to Europe. Another big column is hydrogen. We also heard that here again. They now plan to have a hydrogen economy and want to import and produce 500 terawatts, roughly more, on hydrogen. And what's also a big change in recent months is it's not just green hydrogen anymore. Previously, especially Germany, only wanted hydrogen made from wind, which then is used, the wind energy, in an electrolyzer and then used as hydrogen. Now they are also open for what we call blue hydrogen, which is hydrogen from gas in a steam methane reform. So, and this is definitely a big chance also for Israel, making use of the gas sources even beyond 2020-35, when Europe wants to be clean. I showed you the picture. On the long run, even gas is too dirty. I mean, now it's the clean energy source compared to coal and lignite. It will be in the next 10 years, but there will be a time beyond 2035 when even gas has to become cleaner than it is today from fossil gas. And that is then a chance to blend in hydrogen and later use gas in form of blue hydrogen. And that's one of the big showstopper in the deals with the Saudis today, the length of the contract and the commitment of the delivery contract that fits with the targets of the European Union becoming long-term climate neutral. So this is the new plan. I think what we also learned the hard way is when you think about how do you decarbonize your country, the first discussion is always, and also we heard it today, where do I get the electricity and the energy from? It's about getting the terawatt hours from wind, from solar, from something else. But what we learn is you have to think the whole system. It's also the question, how do you do the backup capacities if there's no wind and no solar? And we have now a big debate in Europe about capacity markets and how we can really bring new investments into the market, because these power plants are needed. They are expensive, but they only get low utilization hours when the wind is not blowing. So this is risky from an investor's perspective, and that needs the market design which fits to that. Then we have transmission. Transmission, again, is very complicated. It takes more than 10 years to build a power line in Germany. All the wind, and especially the wind, which is huge. We have wind farms which are higher than the Cathedral of Cologne, 150 meters plus. The offshore windmills are 280 meters high, the new generation. So these will be way, way, way from the residential areas. That means all the energy has to be transported about 100 of kilometers. And then you have storage, we heard about that. We have distribution networks for the e-cars, for the heat pumps. And finally, people have to buy new end-use appliances. I only can sell someone green electricity or make him use green electricity if this person has a heat pump or an e-car, or a Fischer-Tropsch diesel or something else, but it needs an end-use appliance in the end. Maybe I just give a brief section to all of these. If you are interested in the details, just contact me, and then I can also forward you the slides. So as I said, one big plan is the offshore wind. A majority of that will be in the North Sea. We plan to have about 360 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2050. That's about, let me see, it's about 20 times the Israeli power plant park, which is put on islands in the sea as floating offshore, and then it will be a huge combination of cables and hydrogen pipelines offshore in the ocean or in the North Sea, and then the energy is come to the land. And then onshore, the same problem occurs. We have to spend hundreds of billions of euros in Europe for overhead lines, and especially for underground power cables, and also for hydrogen pipelines. And this is the plan for what we call the hydrogen backbone. On the left-hand side of the picture, you see the new LNG terminals, some of them in Germany, in Spain, and then we have to build some gas pipelines between Spain and France. And the right picture is the interesting vision of the hydrogen backbone 2040. These are about 20,000 kilometers of pipelines. The majority of that is existing pipelines. So we start off with parallel lines, then we switch some of them to hydrogen. We blend some hydrogen and biogas into the other pipelines, and then we develop this infrastructure so it can still work and be very helpful in the end years of the scenario, 2050, when the gas has to be green. And I think this is the only way how I can do it. There were voices in Europe which proclaim an all-electric world, but I can show you some data and facts on infrastructure. All with electrons will not be possible. You have to have liquids and gases in the system. This is a picture on the backup capacity, what I said here. The yellow ones, these are the new wind, onshore wind, offshore wind, and solar capacities. But the problem is they are all volatile. So you don't know if you get electricity out of them or not if you need it. And especially if you put heating systems on electricity, you don't want to have the people sitting in the cold. So you have to have backup capacities. And the new backup capacities are new gas plants, as we just heard today. Most of them are hydrogen ready. We have new pumped hydro storage, but there you have to have mountains and the height difference, and they are quite large. And then we have also the discussion about nuclear power. In Germany, we phase out, but many of our neighbors are discussing the entry in nuclear, as we just heard here, also looking closely in the small and medium scale reactors and really following also the nuclear discussion. And this is the picture I promised you, which really gives a lot about why we need infrastructure and gas infrastructure. The upper right picture is the original picture of the TANAP pipeline. It's a long pipeline, 1,800 kilometers from Azerbaijan to Greece. It's a pipe which is 1 meter 20 wide, and it can carry 40 gigawatts of energy. And if you compare that with an overhead transmission line, and we have the big ones, we have 380,000 volt pipelines, overhead lines in Germany. They are huge and broad, but still, one of these pipelines can carry 14 times the energy of an overhead line. And if you compare that with the huge change of the system, where I said we are currently, when all the existing power plants are close to where the center of the consumption is, now in a couple of years' time, the wind and the solar parks are where nobody sees them because nobody wants to look from his backyard on a 150-meter large wind farm. So we have to transmit all the energy in the future from very far away. And this is not be possible just with electrons. So we need molecules. And they're also much cheaper. So it's not just the capacity, which is much wider, but also transmission is much, much cheaper. If you just compare the TANAP pipeline with an underground cable for electricity we have in Germany, the pipeline is double the distance. It has 10 times the capacity, and the pipeline, the TANAP pipeline costs 10 billion, and the Südlink cable in Germany costs also 10 billion. And it takes you 10 years to build it, because you have to go to court with everyone who lives close to the overhead line or underhead line. So you have to have gas transmission to do the trick. Another big thing is storage. People always say, oh, battery is great, you have Tesla in your mind, and you have really good advantage and progression in battery, which is true, but we have still a really low capacity if we store electrons. And we have the problems that we need cobalt, lithium, and platinum, which are really, prices go up. And we have learning effects in the battery manufacturing, but there is also a limit how the cost of the battery can go down. And here I have a picture where I show you just some energy storage. The left one everybody knows, it's in your car maybe, it's just a standard petrol can, 5 liters, it's 44 kilowatt hours of energy. It's a lot. In the next to it is it's a battery, 10 kilowatt hours in your basement. This is something you can buy in Germany under your roof when you have a rooftop PV. And these cost more than 10,000 euros, just the battery, not the photovoltaic. Then if you look into what is the cost of a tank in a hydrogen car, if you look at the carbon tank in a hydrogen, it costs 4,000 euros, the tank, just the tank. And if you look at gas salt caverns, we have in northern Germany many of them. These are like salt caverns underground and very deep, so you have high pressure. These cost about 78 million euros. And if you then divide the cost of the storage, divided by how much kilowatt hours can you store in this tank, then you see that electricity is super expensive to store. Obviously, what I don't show you here is the lifetime. The lifetime is also not good for the battery compared to the other, but the efficiency is much better. If you store electricity, you have a better round-trip efficiency. But still, you can't store the volumes and without molecules and just rely on electrons. And to show you what we need, please go to the lower end of the slide. Here we see the power load in Germany and you see the numbers and up is you have a positive load that is load minus wind production minus solar production in this situation. And you see that there are 10 days in a row where the wind and the solar in this model here is not enough to cover power demand. And this is not even a very cold day or a very, very dramatic day. It's just 10 days in a row, standard days in a row, where you can't rely on wind and sun. At the same time, we have periods of 3 days or more in a row where you have more electricity than you actually consume because you have so much wind and so much photovoltaics. And this shows you that we need bulk storage. Yeah, we need some batteries and storage to shift it from the middle of the day to the evening when people come home. But we also need, especially if you think about heating, we need storage which can transfer energy and electricity by weeks and months. And this is not a battery, this is molecules and liquids. And I just show you another example of that. I think the upper left pictures you know. On the right-hand side, you see a picture of the gas storage in Reden. It was in the news latest with the Russian crisis. That's 47,000 gigawatt hours. Below that is a picture of Goldistal pump storage in Germany. It's like 2 huge lakes on the mountains and down. And you see the difference in size. Yeah? It's like 47,000 gigawatt hours of the gas storage versus 8.5 gigawatt hours in the huge pump storage. And if you level it up to a German level, it's even more significant. And the bubbles really represent the relativities of the storage. The upper bubble is the oil storage we have in Germany. That's the 90-day oil security storage. I think you have similar storage here in Israel. That is about 500 terawatt hours. Then the yellow bubble, that's the gas storage we have, like Reden and other storages we have in Germany. That's about half the size. And then the very small green blot which you see there, hopefully you see it, that's all electric storage we have. That's all the Goldistal plus all the other pump hydro storages we have in Germany. So you see how small the energy is in power system compared to what energy we store in gases and liquids. And even if I count 50 million electric vehicles, I showed here BMW i3 vehicle, it's still just a red dot. So in the political discussion, we often underestimate how small the power system is compared to the rest of the system. In Germany, it's 25% of the rest of the system. And now we are talking electrifying everything when putting the rest, the 75% on the 25%. That can't work in this short amount of time. And a similar thing is if you look at chargers. So on the left-hand side, it's just a normal pump, a diesel pump, at normal filling station. It's about 10 megawatts if you calculate that, how much capacity that is. And then you see the Tesla superchargers, which have 300 kilowatts. So one pump at a normal gas station is about 34 Tesla superchargers, or about 1,000 private wall boxes in houses. So this shows you what kind of capacity we really need. It's not just about terawatt hours, it's about capacity, which we need to think about when we want to have a good green system. And finally, before I go over to the recommendations to Israel, this is also something to show you what's happening on the transport sector. So we have a lot of efforts on bringing electric vehicles into the markets. So the German OEMs, they also have now hundreds of new models. We have infrastructure investment, we support it, but still by 2030 we expect that about, let's say, 30% of the cars on the street are zero carbon vehicles. 70% are still running like a combustion engine. Because a car in Europe is about 12 years old on average. Now people have to spend a lot on housing, food, we heard inflation, and even if you subsidize it, you don't get so many more cars in the market in 8 years. Obviously the new cars, a lot of that is electric, but you have the old fleet in the market and you have to think about what can you do with the old fleet. For example, with Fischer-Tropsch fuel, with methanol, with synthetic fuels, which you can do that. And the regulation is clear. Some countries already have banned combustion engine. There are now European rules for new cars, only for the new cars. They aim at being about 2 liters of diesel. So if you want to sell a combustion engine car in the next years, it has to be a hybrid car, because with a combustion engine you can't do 2 liters of diesel. But still, even if you do all this effort, all this pressure on OEMs, all this subsidy money, we still have, let's say, 100 million cars which are green and 200 million cars in Europe which are running on fuel, on standard fuels. And this is just the matter of fact, because it takes 12 years to replace it. We need to bring up charging infrastructure. People have to buy the new car. And as I said before, we also have to think about the material, because it's not just Europe who wants the lithium and the cobalt, it's the whole world. And if China wants something, then there are all other dimensions. So this is the European story. So maybe allow me 2 minutes to maybe think a little bit about what this means for Israel. And this is just my view as non-being Israeli, but I think I learned a lot in the discussions in the past year. So firstly, Israel is a densely populated country with growing population and obviously growing power demand, and as we heard today, we want to have the coal phase out, which means gas has a big role. And what we also need to think is Israel as a power island, it's even more complicated than in Europe, where we have a big grid. The Germans, they can flood the wind to Poland, they probably don't like it, or they can send it to Austria who like it because they can store it and sell it back. Or we can give it to Scandinavia with their hydro plants. Here in Israel, if you go with volatile renewables, photovoltaic or wind, and you don't have the neighbors, you have to provide the storage for yourself. And you have to have the backup power plants. Secondly, think about the transmission. I told you, or I showed you that power transmission is important, has to be built, both distribution and transmission line, but it's comparatively weak. First of all, it has to be resilient. The power system is very vulnerable. Every second there has to be the same amount of electricity in and out, and it's not so strong as gas pipelines or liquids, so that has to be done, and the gas infrastructure can later be converted to green, so you can still use it after 2035. Then I think the gas fields, we heard it today, they are a huge chance. First of all, if you use them for backup power for the own power sector, and also in a second phase as blue hydrogen, even carbon neutral backup power. And secondly, Europe is really looking to find a diversified portfolio of trade partners, and they explicitly said, we want partners who share our values. We burned our fingers with Russia, where we said, oh, we trade, and if you go trade, maybe we get closer, but it didn't pay out. So besides Norway, there are not so many countries in the world who have potential to export, who are close and share the values of Europe, so which means this is a real big chance from my perspective for Israel. And I think the last 2 points, they are already known, and you already said it. Think about the whole value chain. Don't overburden the power system because it's much smaller and weaker as you think. We talk about power system all day, but it's only 25–30% of the energy system. And finally, consider all aspects of the energy triangle. I'm very happy about the minister and all the speeches I heard today that you're already doing that. Yeah, thank you very much. I hope there was something interesting for you, and if you have questions, please contact me. You have the data here. Thank you.